Hello, I'm Judge Houston Wells. Welcome to County Connections. This is the weekend before Memorial Day. Today we're at the Frankfort Cemetery with a special guest, Russ Hatter. At the Military Memorial, Russ, in our background is our military memorial. You know a lot of history about its being and what it's about. Tell us about this memorial here and how it affects our community as well as our state.
Well, the cemetery itself was started in 1845. They buried Daniel Boone and his wife, Rebecca. It was a big promotional thing for the cemetery. Over 20,000 people were here for the funeral.
In 1845, huh?
1845.
Just over the way there.
Yeah, just over the way. But this area that we're in right now, the state plot, they call it the State Mound, this is an unusual place that was designed specifically to commemorate and remember and honor the soldiers, men and women, that fought in all the wars that Kentucky was involved in. Kentuckians have been a part of every one of our wars. In 1847, following the Mexican War, we had two burials that happened here from the soldiers that were killed during the Mexican War. And the first burial was with Henry Clay's son, Henry Clay III. He was killed. He was wounded in the legs, and his men carried him off the battlefield, and the Mexicans fired a cannon shot, and fragments from that cannon shot not only finished off Henry Clay III, but it also killed 3 of the men that were helping him off the field. He's buried just on the other side of the war memorial here.
When you talk about the Mexican War, are you talking about the Alamo, that part of?
The Alamo was 1836.
Okay.
Then later on in the early 40s, you had the Texas independence, which a lot of Kentuckians fought in that. And then you had the Mexican War in the mid-1840s. Went for about 2 years. And from that, they brought the bodies back to Frankfort in 1847 and buried them here. But we didn't get this big, huge shaft, this big monument, until 1850. It was made by Richard Launitz, or rather Robert Launitz, and he used a lot of material from Carrara, Italy, to build these beautiful structures in the monument. The Victory statue at the top has cannons. You can see the balls of cannon, and has cannons on top of it. And then the base, the 20-foot square foot base, is made of Connecticut granite. And you can see the eagles there that are guarding the honor of those who fell in different wars. They brought it down the Atlantic Ocean from New York in pieces, and then came in through the Gulf, up the Mississippi River to the Ohio River, and then up to the Kentucky River, and floated it up the river to Frankfort, where they then brought it up and installed it. It's over 60, 63, 65 feet tall. It weighs 150 tons, if you wanted to catch that. And you can probably see on some of the places of the monument, it was their idea to recognize the many Kentuckians that had died in battle. And we had a lot from the Revolutionary War. We had a lot from the War of 1812. In fact, the War of 1812 was almost nearly 100% Kentuckians that fought in that battle.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a lot of boys from Kentucky that were involved in that one. I had a relative. He made it back. He had to run the Indian Gauntlet. He was captured, but Tecumseh saved him, and so I'm here today. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have been able to be on this program with you. But all these fellows, and all the women too, who were involved from some of the battles, are represented. They started out with this monument in 1850. But they realized, after so many wars, there's no way they could get every name on those monuments. They're just incredible amount of people. So they quit. You'll see blank spaces on the monument. There are recognitions on the monument for Boonesboro, Estill's defeat, Blue Licks, the Indian Wars, Harmer's defeat, Wayne's campaign, St. Clair's defeat, one of the worst American defeats in history. Almost 900 men were killed by the Native Americans and the British. Tippecanoe, Mississinawa, the River Raisin. We had a company from Frankfort that was in the Battle of the River Raisin up near Monroe, Michigan. And the governor of Kentucky, Isaac Shelby, was down where Serafini's is. There was a theater on that corner back then. And they came right in the middle of the play and told him about this horrible massacre that happened at the River Raisin. Out of a group from Frankfort, Kentucky, there was about 80, only 4, 5, or 6 came back. And so we lost a lot of lives. The governor called the play off, and there's a recognition for that. The Thames, New Orleans, the Battle of New Orleans, Mexico, Monterey, Buena Vista, and the Little Bighorn is also recognized.
Is that right, the Little Bighorn?
Yeah, you'd think, well, why is that? That's out in Montana. Well, actually, there was a fellow from Frankfort, Kentucky, John J. Crittenden III. He was the grandson of the governor and the statesman, John J. Crittenden, and he was a young fella that just happened to be the son of the Union general, Thomas Crittenden, the governor's son. And so he wanted to follow in his daddy's footsteps. So he got into the Army, and he wound up going out to Montana Territory with Custer's men. We had a lot of Kentuckians with Custer. In fact, the horse he was killed on was purchased over at Woodburn Farm in Woodford County.
How about that?
Yeah. Custer was here in 1871 and 2 in Kentucky to protect African Americans from the Ku Klux Klan. Owen County, Shelby County, and Franklin County was rampant with the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
So anyway, all these stories combine and are recognized here, and they have our own boy on that monument.
And then as time has gone on, we've had World War I and World War II, Korea and Vietnam.
Right.
And so now it's just expanded to honor all of those.
Well, they're not on the big shaft.
Yeah.
All of these plaques that you see surrounding us right here, there's about 10 or 11 of them. They recognize the Revolutionary War soldiers, the War of 1812, the Texas Independence, the Mexican War, the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, II, you mentioned, Korean War, Vietnam, and then not too long ago, the Persian Gulf War.
Okay, good.
Right
Okay.
So this lists names and talks a little bit about those that were involved. This happened in 1986. The state spent a lot of money up here rearranging the terrace and creating walkways so that it's a more telling experience when you come and read these various plaques and realize what we've been through. Now through this way, to the east of us, or I guess it's to the south of us, that is the monument of Richard Mentor Johnson. He lived over in Scott County near Great Crossings is where he lived. He started that Choctaw Indian School, and he was vice president. And shortly after they had the recognition for the Mexican War dead, he died and passed away. So consequently, they made this big monument. It was also made by the same person, Robert Lawrence, that made the shaft behind us here. And it has an interesting marker on the front of it. It shows a replication of him shooting the Indian Tecumseh. That's how he got elected president.
Because he shot Tecumseh?
Well, that's what they thought. He never really said, I shot Tecumseh. But
and where was this? Where was this that this happened?
This would have been up in Canada at the Battle of the Thames,
okay,
where Tecumseh was killed. But with that, he wound up riding it into political fame and became vice president. That's a beautiful monument. He died just at the same time they had recently buried the Mexican War dead, so they built a huge monument for him. Recently, in early 2000, they refabricated that monument, cleaned it up, and restored it. One of the interesting things on the other side of it is it's got Tecumseh's head cut off.
Really? Wow.
Somebody
we'll look at that in a second.
Vandalized
that. Oh, they cut it off?
Yeah, they cut it off.
Oh,
they
wow.
vandalized it.
Well, this cemetery has a lot of areas that that are dedicated to soldiers other than this spot.
Right.
I noticed that as we came in, there was a Confederate memorial over there. Is there actually a Union memorial too, other than this area right here?
No, not really. There's a marker out at Green Hill for the African American Union soldiers that fought in the Civil War. It's one of 4, I think, in the United States for the African Americans. But it is a Union. The only Union monument that I'm aware of in the old times is in Lewis County. There's an actual Union marker for them. What we have here in Frankfort in 1892, the United Daughters of the Confederacies helped bring bodies from the battlefield of Chickamauga, and they're the ones, there's about 68 of them that are buried in our Confederate plot. And there's a few Kentuckians there, but most
So not all of them were from Kentucky. They just needed a burial. Is that what
right.
you're saying?
What happened after the Civil War, to the victors go the spoils, they established Union Memorial National Cemeteries. That was for the Union dead. It was not for the Confederates. They were left lying wherever they died.
Wow.
And the dogs and the hogs got a lot of them. But the United Daughters of the Confederacy went around and took up the remains of these boys and tried to get different communities to take them. And Frankfort took some from the Battle of Chickamauga, and that's when we set that one up. This area over here, Section M, has a lot of soldiers buried in it, and also governors as well. Maybe a few judges too. You never can tell. But you're right. Throughout the entire cemetery, I can see from right here, there's a stone over there that's for Colonel Humphrey Marshall, who was a Confederate war general here in Frankfort, Kentucky, and he's buried here in the cemetery. There's just a lot of special things.
So much history here.
Yes, the history of Frankfort winds up on this hill for the most part.
That's awesome. Russ, it's such an honor to hear your stories.
I want to tell one more,
Oh, you got it.
and that's this one right here. This is the grave of Theodore O'Hara. He wrote a poem called Bivouac of the Dead. And you'll be in Gettysburg or over at Camp Nelson, any of the national cemeteries, and you'll probably see words from his poem that he wrote. And I'd like to share with you the first verse. It's the one that you usually see.
Okay.
And we can close out the program with this, since it's Memorial Day weekend. The muffled drum's sad roll has beat the soldier's last tattoo. No more on life's parade shall meet that brave and fallen few. On fame's eternal camping ground, their silent tents are spread, and glory guards with solemn round the bivouac of the dead.
Wow. And so that was
Theodore
O'Hara. And was he from Frankfort?
Well, more recently, the historians are saying that he was born here in Frankfort.
Okay.
His daddy was a school teacher, Keen O'Hara, and quite an educator. Now, you won't find his name associated with this poem in the national cemeteries. He was a Confederate soldier.
Ah, okay. Okay. Politics and wars. All right. Once again, Russ, that's awesome. Thank you so much for all the information. And I hope that we can come back and do some more exploring of the Frankfort Cemetery. There's so much great history here that a lot of us we need to know about. Also, as I stand here today and I look at this, a beautiful day with the sun out, and this being right before Memorial Day weekend, I want to, as I look and I see all the American flags around the tombstones of the men and women that have fought in the wars and that have died here in our cemetery. It is such an honor. It is such a humble experience to come up here at this time of year and see so many flags up here around the tombstones. I appreciate what the Frankfort Cemetery does. Russ, I appreciate so much how you carry the history forward here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you once again for watching. Remember, this is Memorial Day weekend. Please, please remember the soldiers, the men and women that have given their lives for this country. God bless America. Thank you for watching.